Musicians these days live and work in an increasingly difficult environment. The barrier for entry is being lowered by the introductions of new technologies, and at the same time, streaming's popularity has lowered the value of individual music. This squeezes the small and medium-sized musician's ability to make consistent money. If you're an indie musician these days, then you're constantly fighting for space. And while we are painfully aware of the limitations of the music industry, what we might not be aware of is how these limitations have been deliberately constructed by the largest companies in the industry. So how did they get this way? And why is it important for us to recognize this reality? When any conversation happens around labels and distribution, you'll undoubtedly hear three names: Sony, Warner, and Universal. These three mega labels have carved out a huge section of the industry, with 85% of label revenues in the US and 72% of the global market being produced by just these three companies. They have succeeded at this massive joint market share not only by outspending smaller rivals, but by buying them up, controlling a larger and larger roster of artists. We spoke to Grayson Gilmour, who has been a successfully published artist for 15 years, to see how musicians are affected by this consolidation, specifically in New Zealand.
How much of the music industry do you think is connected to the major labels, or how much knowledge do you have? And do you think that has a negative effect on them? Like the music industry as a whole?
Yeah, I mean, sure, like the major labels arguably still have as much power and as much reach as they as have always had. But I would say that the thing that has definitely changed in the last, decade or two is just that opportunity for artists to carve out their own paths.
Right.
It's not like I guess there used to be kind of like gatekeeping or like really established methods of artists reaching audiences.
Yeah.
And I feel like the internet at large
Yeah.
kind of just broke those established kind of pathways for artists and presented new opportunities. And then all of a sudden the industry had to adapt, and the major labels were like, we don't have to, or like, we don't necessarily have to kind of spend all this capital investing in artists from the start. They can basically prove themselves online, and then we'll just pick them up.
Yeah.
So there's still a power play at work, but
Yeah.
Ultimately the artist chooses whether or not they want to be involved in that sort of exchange. And yeah, like for better or worse, like I have had the major label kind of like discussion and like just kind of been like, oh, that doesn't align with me morally or artistically, so kind of walked away from it. And I feel like there's still wiggle room. It's not all doom and gloom.
No, it's not all doom and gloom. Corporate consolidation is common in most modern industries, as larger companies have the resources to take losses and expand their business in a more competitive format. This forms a vicious cycle as power concentrates at the top. This has become especially exploitable in digital media-focused industries. Our modern tech paradigm allows for distribution through streaming to be concentrated among a few digital platforms. Shame. These platforms have formed special promotional agreements with the deep-pocketed labels. For example, Spotify was responsible for paying UMG 2.28 billion US dollars for streaming royalties in 2023. But recently, these kindred souls were involved in a standoff betraying to Spotify's royalty payouts price because of threats that UMG would remove their extensive catalogue from the streaming platforms. They renegotiated the royalty contracts so that UMG would receive an undisclosed sweetheart rate from Spotify, although, funnily enough, this deal does not reflect in the artist's share of streaming revenue payouts, as revenue per stream has remained flatlining since 2020. It's important for us as artists to be able to recognize the unbalance in the industry. These issues as New Zealand artists is exacerbated since we are a smaller market and we are more vulnerable to overseas cooperations. Kiwi artists also have an incredibly hard time breaking through internationally without help of larger label promotion.
The other question that I have is, do you think diversification is key in the music industry for the future? One, to consume the music and how, like, obviously it's really diverse at the moment. You can buy everything, get everything, listen to everything on the internet and whatnot. But, you know, just engaging with every artist, like, obviously giving everyone fair opportunities. Like, I feel like that diversification could be quite good, or maybe being able to explore more options to have diversification with everyone as an upcoming artist instead of, you know, only like breakout artists. You know, they could be
Yeah, I guess
good to go.
like I mean it's almost natural that it works in this particular way, right? Like, not everyone's gonna connect. Not every artist is gonna connect with an audience.
100%.
And like there are a lot of platforms and a lot of opportunities for artists to make those connections nowadays that didn't really exist kind of pre social media or pre kind of internet
Yeah.
streaming. So arguably it is diverse, but you know, artists will still face the same challenges of how do they engage with and kind of like work with an audience. How do they you know connect with people? I think it's like that hasn't changed despite the platforms evolving.
Since corporate consolidation has become so overwhelming within the industry, the question becomes, what can we do to rebalance the scales? It's important for artists and consumers to have a say. Being aware of the scale is key. We recommend researching your favorite artists, what label they're signed to, and who owns that label. Do they promote ways to support their artists outside of the music industry? We all need to have an idea of what shape the industry should take in order to make our voices heard.
The nature of our capitalistic system is prone to consolidation. Technology has increasingly pushed the problems into hyperdrive, but it also presents solutions. We live in an area of incredible ease of knowledge, a democratization of choice. The key to improving the system is being aware. The majors and the players that enable their overreach are companies that want to operate in the shadows. Art is just a product of them, but we as consumers and creatives have the power to shape the system to protect the art that we love.